All right. Hello, everyone coming in to the webinar. We got another big crew tonight. Um, I'm excited. I'm here with Tavis. He's right above me on my screen. I don't know where he is on yours. Wave and say hi, Tavis. You can unmute yourself too if you want.
Hello.
Okay. Oh my gosh, there's 87 people in here already, and it's now one after the hour, and we're over 100. So that's great. It's great to see you all in here. I'm going to encourage you, hop onto the chat, introduce yourself. Uh, Say hi to Tavis if you know him. Tell a little story about him for all the people that don't know him. You can share something maybe a little incriminating. I think Brooke is on the call. He probably has like 25 stories to share that he shouldn't. Let's see. Uh, Good, good. People are coming in saying hi. Hey, tell us where you're from. Um, all over, all over. I guess there's Rusula's everywhere. So why wouldn't you be everywhere and attend this? Now, I'll also be curious, like tomato. I say Rusula, but I hear a lot of other people smarter than me saying it other ways. I'm including you in that list, Davis.
I've heard it probably 20 different ways. I had an old crabby German woman in my class a number of years ago, and she said that the proper way is to pronounce your two S's differently. That the first one is S and the second one is sh. So it's Russula.
Oh,
That's
weird.
too much.
My
Yeah.
first thought was it's rude differently, Allah.
Yeah. No, it's tougher. But I've heard Rochella, I've heard Russula, Rusula.
All
Who
right.
cares, right?
Yeah, well, it's 2 minutes after. We've got a lot of people in here. I think it's time to start this off. So for all of you that are in here, just quick thing. Feel free to chat during the webinar. It's cool. We like to have lots of side conversations. It's entertaining and informative. We stay out of the realm of political talk, or I will turn it off. If there's kind of anything weird in there, we just turn the chat off. Um, as for the questions, put the questions in the Q&A section. You can put them in chat, but somebody in there, including me, will say put them in the Q&A, and that way he can check the questions later on and answer them. Hey, make sure you read the questions when you do that too, Tavis, because our listeners won't know what our people on the video won't know which question you're answering.
Okay, or are you going to read them to me as they come in, or am I just waiting until the
No, I
end?
think we will wait till the end, or maybe a little
Okay.
break point along the way if there's a lot. But I know you have a pretty long presentation, so I also don't want to wait much longer. So let's get ready to start it here. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Hi, I'm Trent Blizzard, and I am here with Tavis Lynch from Wisconsin. Say hi, Tavis. Um,
Hi, everyone.
Tavis is going to talk to us today about Russula and really, I think, how to identify them and probably some fun stories about them. Heavy on the taxonomy, maybe heavy on the confusion too for some of us, because it's a deep dive that I think we're about to go on. I'm going to just offer a quick introduction, and hopefully you can tell us more about yourself once you get started. Why don't you pop your slide up here, Tavis, while we do this? And get ready for that. And I'm just going to say, I know Tavis from Wisconsin. I've lived there for a couple of years before I moved here, and he is a very important person on the scene in the state of Wisconsin and nearby states. The regional expert at a lot of our events. He is the chief mycologist at kind of nearly every event happening in Wisconsin, whether it's northern or southern. I'd like to say like you're somebody like the rest of the country should know about. You know so much about mushrooms. He grew up learning them, and the depth of his knowledge is awesome. So I'm really excited to have brought you in here tonight and have you talk to us about one of your favorite mushroom types, the genus Russula. So I'm going to say goodbye and turn it over to you and sit back and watch.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trent. Can you hear me? Wonderful. So, hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about the genus Russula. That's how I say it. I don't care how you say it. And I'm going to open tonight with a great quote from quite a while back uh, from the old illustrations of British mycology. I'll just let everyone read that one real quick. I think that's going to be kind of the theme for the evening. I might be able to help with sorting out some of this. Some of it's going to be just as baffling as it was before we started. So my name is Tavis. I live about an hour south of Lake Superior in northern Wisconsin. I've been chasing our local mushrooms here for just over 40 years. I started teaching for a bunch of community ed programs and continuing ed programs around the state. Now I teach in, I think, right around 35 schools. In about 2010 or 2012, one of the schools I was working for wanted something better than just mushrooms of summer, mushrooms of fall, spring edibles. They wanted kind of a course in study on various genera of mushrooms, and the director chose Russula for one of them. And fine, I can talk for 45 minutes on Russula or a half an hour. I don't remember how long they were. And I guess that's what popped up in Google. So in 2013, Dr. Bunyard shows up to an event and he goes, "Hey, there's the Russula guy." I don't want to be the Russula guy. I never did. I wanted to be the waxy cab guy. That was what my fascination was at. But after a couple of years of that, I kind of had to embrace it. So I started a little journey around the country. I've now photographed Russula in 40 states. And oddly enough, the states I haven't hit are the northeast part of the country. So I'll be excited to attend the annual foray this year and maybe spend a couple weeks tooling around the northeast part of the United States. So that's why I'm doing it. It wasn't my idea. I just had to kind of embrace it. And this picture is an example of why I didn't want to do it. These were all found within 150 feet of each other on Madeline Island up just north of me here. How many species are there? I don't know, somewhere between 6 and 13. We'll see why that makes sense here in a little bit. So who is Russula? Well, it's kind of some interesting lineage here. Russula is in the Russulaceae, in the Russulates, but it's kind of the misfit of the order. The Russulaceae is. This is what we would expect. You know, we're all familiar with some of these little colorful, very fragile mushrooms that we see in every forest setting in the United States and in the rest of North America, of course. But the Russulates as an order mostly contains pored fungi, crusts, some corals, some tooth fungi like this sterium crust that we have here. And we're going to look at a couple others, but just briefly, because that's not what we're here to talk about. But it's kind of surprising when you look at the various morphology within that order. We've got little toothy mushrooms like this Oroscalpium. This wood coral that we see everywhere, Artemisias. It's a very common edible in spring where I'm at. This little booger crust, the Piniophora, even Hericium, Bonderzephia. There's all kinds of them that fall into the Russulates, but the Russulaceae is kind of the only group of gilled mushrooms. And when we think Russulates, we think of Russula, but it's truly the misfit. So within the Russulaceae, we have about 15 genera. The ones we're going to see most often, of course, is going to be Russula lactifluus and Lactarius. Tonight, we're concentrating on Russula. So what is Russula? Well, it is terrestrial. They are mycorrhizal with a vascular plant, typically trees. They are fragile, some more than others, and they are wildly unpopular. Beginners like to look at them. You know, they're flashy. They're always, you know, the kind of the standout mushroom that you see in the forest because they are quite colorful. But then the fascination fades after they can't find value in the mushroom. And what I'm referring to there is the classic beginner, can I eat it? Is it something that's edible? And sure, there are edible Russula, and we will finish tonight talking about some of those. But then they kind of just lose interest. It's like, well, if I can't eat it, I'm going to look for something else. And I hear that 1,000 times a year. More experienced hunters tend to ignore them because they are difficult to identify. Some of them aren't. Some of them are actually quite easy, but some of them are exceedingly difficult. And one group that you're going to not see very much of tonight is any of the red cap Russula, though I am currently working on a guide for about, or a key for about 40 species in the upper Midwest. So what I was seeing at these forays, I've been a member of the WMS, the Wisconsin Mycological Society, in and out since about, I think, like 1996. There was a few years where I wasn't involved, but at all of our events, they're counting species and they're attaching names to everything except the Russula. They were piled into what I called the Russula dump. So these two species in my hand here, it doesn't look like my hand, but I know I took the picture. Uh, they were in the same pile. Well, they're quite clearly different species, and they weren't counted. So we kind of had an evolution of species lists set up after I started scolding people. I'm like, you got to count them. We're always trying to get, these high species counts. So it started as all the Russula went into a pile and just got ignored. Well, I mean, everybody, I get it. Everybody's fascinated with Amanita and they're fascinated with, some of the more interesting genera, but hey, why were they getting piled up? So after some scolding, then we started counting them. Hey, there's a whole bunch of Russula species here. So let's count them. Maybe there's 10, maybe there's 20. Then we started collecting them, and I have a pretty extensive Russula herbarium across the street in my old office. I might have, maybe 1,000 specimens from around the country. I know that there's at least 137 distinct species just from Wisconsin that I have over there. So when they're collected, we started adding at least some type of a number so that we could count them individually. So we were calling it Russula species Hiles Foray -01. That's at least something that it's getting counted. And then there's quite a handful of people now in that I've worked with in the last couple of years that can identify them to at least subgenus or even section in some cases, and sometimes species. So Russula section Russula looks a lot better than a whole pile of multicolored Russula in a pile not being counted. So we don't have enough valid names. So a lot of the names that we're using for our North American Russula are borrowed European names. I know that's not perfectly accurate, but at least we're attaching something to it for now until we can get some barcoding done and get some decent information on some of these species. And I'm not just concentrating my life on Russula. I've got other mushrooms I like to chase around too, but we're we're at least attaching something to it. So when we get close, maybe it matches a European species. We've got a couple of options. We can attach these little clippards to it. A Phoenix, that means kind of related to. So this means we know it's not that mushroom, but it's very close. This is how it was described to me. I'm sure there's a better definition for these. Or confer or compare to the CF. This means we know it's close and it actually could be that. That's how I was taught that many moons ago. So some examples, Russula affinis zavari. I know we don't have Russula zavari in the United States, but we've got a fairly common Russula up here that I see, northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin in the Laurentian style forest, the northern conifer forest, that when we've got aspen and pine together, we see this Russula zavari. Well, it's not that, but at least we put a name to it. And then, of course, compared to with confer Russula CF cyanoxantha, that's definitely a European species. We have something that is absolutely morphologically identical here. Is it cyanoxantha? It could be. We know it's close. So we have these options. And again, at least we're adding a title to it and we're making some progress. This is certainly in its infancy, even though it's been studied for 200 years, 300 years, and everybody just kind of gives up on it. So I'm saying just put a little more pride in your work, a little more effort. So Rolf Singer did something interesting with the genus Russula, and we're just going to kind of breeze through these. They were effective, and I did used to group these into these 5 sections, and it worked pretty well because it was easy. It was very easy. So we had the ingrati, the declarantes, the rigidi, the compacti, and section Russula. It turns out it wasn't perfect, but some of these are still in use as sections within other subgenera, and some of them became subsections of sections. It's a lot bigger than 5 sections, I assure you. So his system had section ingrati. That's our what I call our stinky Russula. That's what the odor of bleach or almonds. Some people really like that odor. I really don't. To me, it smells like almonds in a hotel swimming pool area. It's got that bleachy, chloriney odor that I don't necessarily care for. The cap is typically straw colored to a pale reddish brown, and it does have some bruising, usually a reddish brown or a grayish color, and they taste oily or acrid. I kind of glanced over the list of who's here tonight. It looks like I've been in the woods with about 60 or 80 of us, and I've certainly cut a little slice off for people to taste. They know what that flavor is. I describe it as licking a 9-volt battery with a little hot sauce on it. It's a spicy taste, but not necessarily a pleasant one. Section declarantes, these are usually very colorful and all parts bruising gray to black or pink to, I'm sorry, black or pink to red to black, and usually gray to black. Uh, you're going to see that around Russula decalorans, obviously, with the name. We're going to look closer at that one when we see it where it really belongs. And then the spore print of these is quite variable. I've got a couple spore prints and a crappy picture that I took a couple days ago just so that we can kind of see the color difference. The rigid section, rigidity, these are dry caps, sometimes prunos or even crustose. These are kind of our more sturdy Russula. They're still a little bit fragile, but not as fragile as some that we're going to see here in a second. These are going to be colorful without the staining. So purples, greens, yellows, and reds. Cap color is not going to be as important as we think because these colors can vary so much, and some of them even have all of these colors on the cap at the same time. Spore print again is variable and sometimes very, very dark, like an orangey ochre color. And most of these do have a mild taste or mildly acrid. And yeah, I mean this system, like I said, it does not work perfectly with genetics, but this is the group that you would consider for the table, the only group really. Section compacti, this got destroyed, and we're going to show you how that got destroyed here in a few minutes. But these are our very firm mushrooms. They always have a white stem. There's never any hint of color there, natural color. There is bruising. The gills and stem discoloring brown or grayish brown, and they don't have any variation in their spore color. It's always white. And then section Russula, that's our really fragile mushrooms. I'm sure we've all seen the ultra fragile Russula. This did hold up. So you've got section Russula, you've got subgenus Russula now, section Russula, subsection Russula. That's our ultra fragile ones. Spore print is a little bit variable on this. It doesn't quite get to the dark ochre orange, but it does have some yellowish color. And most of these are quite acrid tasting. Some of them quite hot. But is there something better? So that I'm not. I think that system's probably 40 or 50 years old. Oh no, I'm 40 or 50 years old. It's probably older than that. So it worked from a morphological standpoint, but it didn't work genetically. These mushrooms, some of them that he's got lumped together, aren't really related to each other that closely that they could be in the same section. So there's a fabulous publication that came out in 1990. Jeffrey and Raymond built this awesome key, and I've had the PDF for quite a while, and I just found an original copy of it. My friend Matt had it in his library, and he was kind enough to give it to me. This was an interesting system because it didn't use the dichotomous key that we usually see in field guides where it's all yes or no questions. If yes, go to 3. If no, go to 4. This was a multi-tiered key. So it measured the color of the cap. Is it red? Is it yellow? Is it purple? And you assign a letter to that. How far does the cuticle peel? You just pinch the cuticle at the margin and peel towards the center. That great. Somebody had the idea to figure that out. It's actually kind of an effective tool. Color of the stem, that means is it white or does it have a flush on it? And that means any flush of color. Cap diameter, it's basically under 4 centimeters, over 10 centimeters, or everything in between, which is where most of them will fall. Spore print color, there's actually a color key there that shows you the lightest to the darkest, and you kind of assign a letter to that by groups. And then the taste, is it mild? Is it spicy? Is it bitter? And then is there any staining or bruising present? So we just threw up a mystery mushroom here. I do know what this one is. So we using the key, we've given it the letter A because the cap is red. The cuticle, if I were to pinch it and peel it, it peels from 1/3 to 3/4 of the way to center. The stem is white, as in there's no blushing on it. There's no little hint of pink. The cap falls into that regular range of 4 to 10 centimeters. The spores are yellow to deep ochre. They're quite dark on this mushroom. And the taste is acrid, slowly so, but it is acrid. And the flesh does not color, so we don't add that last letter, which would be the V. So our final code is AIKNRS, and we've got that sorted out as Russula Corinthia rubra is one of the candidates. There was a couple that fit. I do believe this to be Corinthia rubra. I know it to exist in 3 places, 2 in Wisconsin and 1 in Upper Michigan. So is that accurate? Yeah, it could be. It's certainly attaching a name to something. But we've come a long ways. We've gotten better. So these are the modern Russula infragenerics. It's been divided into 9 subgenera. Russula, the Heterophyllidea, the Archaea, Brevipedum, Compacti, Cressotunicati, Glutinosi, Malidori, and the brand new Premio-Ocracia. So I have no way of telling you every single subsection within every single section because we would be here for a month. And I don't know them all. I've got a stack of papers I'm still trying to catch up with on this new system. And it's not that new, but I think it was kind of started in 2013 and I think kind of perfected around 2020. But the bottom one, the last one, that was just added last year. And I do have a paper on it on a couple species from China. But I didn't really have anything that applied to us here in the eastern United States. So subgenus Russula did work with the Singer plan. It's definitely the largest subgenus. It has, I think, 15 sections, and I could be 1 or 2 off on that, but dozens of subsections. Most of our red-capped, but not all. There's red-capped Russula in several of the subgenera, but most of them are going to fall into subgenus Russula. And most of the fragile ones, the ones that just break apart when you handle them. All of the shrimp-scented Russula will also fall into subgenus Russula, which before it was a little bit confusing. There's a section, the Zerempelina section within Russula, then they're all included there. But with the old Singer system, they fell into Decolorantes because they do have that slight staining to them, if anybody was kind of playing that out in their head. Now we're just going to go through a couple examples of each that I'm confident in, and some that, hey, I might have them wrong, but it's something. Russula betularum. This is one that's fairly common where I'm at. It's a pale red one. I think the color on my screen's a little bit screwy. It's kind of a pale pink. There's no orange to it. It kind of looks orangey, but it's a classic Russula. This grows exclusively with birch. So if you're in a birch grove and you see these light pink, they're fragile, but not as fragile as some of the other ones like Sylvestris, that's extremely fragile, or Fragilis, that's really fragile. But they're definitely fragile. Russula decolorans, we can recognize this by this little bit of staining here. These did stain a lot more later in the day. This one's, I found a lot of this in Colorado and definitely in the upper Midwest. We see this one fairly often. And one that looks very similar to it, Russula fulvescens. It's got that same fulvous color, that coppery orange, but it lacks the staining. So these are actually in 2 different subsections, or 2 sections even, but they're still falling within subgenus Russula. And then, of course, our Zerempelina complex, and that name is probably not going to be valid here. when I was in Colorado 2 summers ago, I think it was, we found some shrimp Russula that were green. And the ones that we see in Wisconsin are actually orange. So it's kind of cool to see the color variations on that. And I think there was a couple names thrown around for the orange ones. Barley, I think, was one of them. But I think that one's European. It's hard to say. And I see a hand did come up. We got a question. I'll get to those at the end. Subgenus Heteroflidii. This is another massive subgenus. This is where we're going to see most of our green Russula and a lot of the yellows. But we're also going to see section ingrati that Singer came up with. We're going to see that actually fall into this subgenus, which is kind of interesting because it doesn't look like the other Russula in this group, but it does fit genetically. But what's interesting is it's the section got split. So I'm going to show you 3 of these section ingrati that are in subsections, I should say. It got split down into at least 3. Russula variata, I can't believe that this mushroom that grows all over my front yard, I don't have a reasonable photograph of it. This was the best picture I had, which is inexcusable. It's the first mushroom I step on when I walk out of my house. But this falls into the Heteroflidii. Another similar species, of course, Cynoxantha. I tend to see more greens than reds with variata, and I tend to see more pinks or reds with Cynoxantha. It's not always perfect. It's really not. It just seems to be that variata has a tendency more towards green than towards red, although both of them can be either color or any modeled variation of those 2 colors, or 3 or 4 colors. Russula grata, this one you can see as Laura Serassi in some of the older books. Definitely one of the more common fragrant Russula statewide. Where I'm at, they seem to be a lot larger than they are south of me. Even the southern part of Wisconsin, they seem to be a lot smaller. And I do have some photos of that coming up a little later. So Russula grata, Russula pectinatoides, and Russula aminolens, the 3 most common of the stinky Russula that we see, all got put in different subsections. So they weren't, yes, they're in the same section as Singer had it, but it's divided a little bit further than that even. And of course, aminolens, it tends to be a little bit more of the gray brown than the tan brown than the other 2. All 3 of them are common. Aminolens probably being less common than grata. Subgenus Archaea. So this is the oldest lineage of Russula, and it has not been divided into any sections. The most frequently encountered species is Russula earlyi. I don't have a picture of it because I've never seen it. It grows too far east of me, and I'm hoping there's still some fruiting when the annual foray is happening, because I would love to get some decent photos of it. So instead, you get Chuck Norris, because I don't have pictures of it, and I don't like borrowing photos. Subgenus Brevipedum. So within that subgenus, we have the Lactarioideae. These are the ones that look lactarius or lactifluous looking. And within that section, we have the very common Russula brevipes. The other sections within this subgenus aren't really clear. There's a lot of overlapping, and there's a little bit of a question if this really even belongs in Russula, because it's so close to the edge. And these are in no particular order, by the way. It's the way I slapped them up there. Then this, of course, and we don't see the blue very well in this photograph, but this is our Russula brevipes variety acrior, which typically, I think my pointer will work on here, has a hint of a blue ring around where the gills meet the stem. Definitely very common in all forest types in all the states. I've seen it all over the place. And is it multiple species? It could be. I think that'd be an interesting study just to concentrate on one species. Subgenus Compacti. So this gets a little bit weird, but this contains all the mushrooms that stain either gray to black or pink to black, all of them producing a white spore print, and it got divided into 3 sections. Usually the cap is grayish, pale gray, I guess I should say, to a darker grayish brown, even some hints of white here and there. And we do have a handful of species. The one I see most would probably be Russula densifolia, and that just means dense foliage, which we know that's not foliage; those are gills, lamellae, but they're densely packed together. Compared against Russula dissimulans here, where the gills are certainly a lot wider. So with densifolia, if we look at this edge that I cut right here, it is pretty dark brownish gray as it's starting to stain. But with dissimulans, if we look at this edge that I cut, it goes through a pink stage first and then goes to black eventually. It just keeps getting darker and darker. This reaction takes a long time. There's numerous other ones. There's one here that I've been borrowing the name Russula consabrina. I don't think that's going to really be valid, but at least we're attaching something to it, as I've said a few times today. Subgenus Crassitunicati, sections are very unclear within this subgenus. Two notable species are Russula pharinipes and Russula crassitunicata. I have never seen either of those species. I did check iNaturalist yesterday, and pharinipes seems to be pretty common east and west. It's just not where I'm at. I'm stuck in the middle of the country where our mushrooms are different. We've got plenty of mushrooms here. They're just not what people are going to see. I think most of us are probably either east or west of me, extremely. Subgenus glutinosi. So this, I only know of one species in there, and it seems to be pretty rare, and that is Russula glutinosa. iNaturals had one observation of it, so I got to go through my notes and photos because I do have it here in Wisconsin. So I should probably update my iNaturalist, or maybe I've got them on MO. I didn't check MO today for that. But there is no division into sections. As far as I can tell, there was only one species within this subgenus. I think maybe there's a couple that I'm not aware of. And I do have a paper in America, I'm saying, because I know there's a few species in China. And then we have subgenus Malidori. So this just means bad odor. Um, the sections are unclear in this subgenus at this point, but what's interesting is Russula compacta does not belong to subgenus Compacti. It belongs in the Malidori. And I had never heard the name the fish biscuit. I had never heard that until a couple days ago. Kind of a silly name if you ask me, but they do have an odor. There's no doubt about it. These are very, very dense. Originally from Singer's interpretation was in section compacti, but now with genetic evidence, it doesn't really fit there. Very dense gills, staining easily brown when handled. And usually when you find it, you find them in pretty big troops. Typically when I see this, they're not extremely large, maybe 3 to 4 inches across. But we do have one forest near Bayfield, Wisconsin, where we're finding these closer to like 10 and 11 inches wide. So is it the same species or just a very similar species? I would say it's very likely a second species. The host trees were different as well. But we don't have two names for them as of now. They're all falling into this lump here. And I'm okay with that for now until it gets, delineated a little bit better. And then we have this brand new subgenus, Gremioocraceae. I don't know very much about this at all. It was just erected last year and it kind of lands in the middle on the old tree of life. Definitely some Chinese species. I found a couple papers on that, but I really don't have much more on that. It's the ninth. It's the ninth subgenus. So if anybody has something they could email me, I would love to read it. So what is the best we can do in the field? Well, I'll tell you what, we can do a lot better than just piling all of our multicolored Russula into a heap and letting them rot and nobody looks at them. Hey, spend some time on them. So cap color, very debatable on that. I've seen what is probably the same species be very pale pink and very dark purple, or reds and oranges. You'll see that too. It's like, yeah, they're clearly the same mushroom. They're growing together, but the color is that variable. Spore print, a little bit debatable there too. I've seen one mushroom produced different colored spores on its second print. It's like they're maturing to a color, or we're seeing variation within a species too. Odor. Once you smell that almondy odor, you'll never forget it. It's very distinct. Like I said, I don't care for it, but there's some other odors too. There's some oily smells. Open up a bottle of old vegetable oil and take a hit off that. It's a smell very similar to that some of the Russula will produce. Taste and spit. Is it bitter? Is it acrid? Is it mild? And actually, the mild ones, the flavor's quite nice. The peeling of the cuticle. I've got a horrible blurry picture of that coming up. I couldn't find any Russula today because we're under 8 feet of snow here and it's 80 below zero, so there's not a lot growing out there. Chemical reactions. So, your standard little chemical kit with ammonia and um, iron salts and KOH. Yeah, they work, but we've got a couple others we're going to look at that actually seem to work a little bit better. One of them is pretty new to me. We'll talk about that when we get there. I got something at the top there, but this pop-up keeps coming down every time somebody does something, and I can't read it. Okay, season. Yeah, when does it grow? Most of the Russula that I see up here really don't start until mid-July. Where I live, the mushroom season is only 60 days long. It starts in mid-July, it ends in mid-September. But south of me, definitely we're going to see Russula starting a little earlier, and we're gonna see some that start a lot later. It's really hard to define it up here because the season is so short, with a couple of exceptions. One being Russula sessons that I don't see usually until after everything else is done. I see it when the tricholoma are starting to come up, and then I start to see Russula sessons. The margin, is there any texture to it? Is it curled up? The size, and that's a regional thing. It's kind of interesting. I'll show you a picture of a Russula grata here in a little bit. That's just enormous. Shape, yeah, they're all kind of a similar shape. We do see definitely in subgenus Brevipedum more of that lactarius shape than a traditional Russula shape. And the gill spacing, that is important. We're going to look at all of these in a little bit better detail as we go. Host tree, definitely important. Is it birch? Is it oak? Is it pine? And all the Russula are going to be associated with some type of a tree. Stem flush. So that's that little blushing of color on the stem that we see. Sometimes it's ultra faint and can be overlooked. So we've got a way to make that visible. It's kind of cool. Soil type. We're going to see one here in a minute that only grows in sand. Elevation, that's going to be directly related to what trees are growing there. I have seen some interesting Russula in Colorado with Engelmann spruce and subalpine fir that aren't growing at lower elevation. So it's not necessarily the mushroom, it's the tree, it's the host tree with it. And then, of course, our microscopy and the granddaddy of them all, genetic sequencing. So this is that crappy picture I referred to earlier. We've got Russula and Russula. The one's on foil, the other one's on black paper. White. They can be absolutely stark. Or we see a little bit of a deeper ochre color with the one on the right. So, and any color in between. Odor and taste can be important. It's pretty rare that I would put a Russula on the table without even just taking a little nibble of it just to see if it's one of the hot ones. And odor, the smell of bleach and cherries versus something that smells oily or smells mushroomy, pleasant. This is what I mean by the peeling of the cuticle, and I apologize, I don't have a better picture of this. I've done it 1,000 times. Why I forget to take pictures of things like that is beyond me. But you just pinch it right at the margin and pull straight towards the center. See how far it goes before it breaks. Rips into a triangle. And I've had it where I've peeled the whole thing off. But usually that's a mushroom that's already entered into decay a little bit, which doesn't take very long with Russula. They can decay very quickly. Their life cycle is very short. Chemical reactions. So KOH and physophore, they do things, erasing color, turning greens to oranges. I've documented all this. Did I really see it as an effective tool? Limited for sure. The two that are really cool is paradimethylaminobenzaldehyde, the PDAB. That one is really effective at showing stem flush that's really hard to see, which is kind of cool. So if it's got a little hint of pink and maybe you didn't notice it, hit it with a little PDAB and that color will show up, greens and pinks and reds. And then Ed Lubo out in Colorado gave me a little vial of guaiac a couple of years ago, which was very cool, seeing the different reactions there. So it's a brown fluid, and it has these amazing blue reactions. So the method there being, did it turn to blue within 30 seconds, or 30 seconds to 4 minutes, or not at all, or anything past 4 minutes is also considered negative. So I'm still working on all my notes with that. And if anybody out there knows a source of guaiac, that would be great. I do have a little bit left. They tried to make me some at UW La Crosse, and it did not work. So I'm a little bit of a struggle there finding some. And then, of course, the chemical that you're going to need if you plan on doing any Russula work, and that's bourbon. It helps. Striate margin. In this case, I would call this sulcate. It's definitely cupped out, scooped out. It's got texture. You can feel it. Not all Russula have it. And then how far from the margin towards the center of the cap does it go? Is it a quarter of the way? Is it halfway? Is it just a little bit around the edge? Size. So this is a young Russula grata where we're at up here. They get enormous, 9 or 10 inches wide. I don't see this mushroom getting that large in other parts of the country. Maybe it does. Maybe it's just in my head, but they do seem larger the further north you go. I heard a really interesting theory on that one time. I'm not sure I'm going to bite into it, but they have to be bigger up north to produce as many spores because their season is so much shorter. Yeah, that sounds cool. I'm not buying it. Not necessarily. Gill spacing. So we've all seen the distant, the close, the crowded. It's kind of subjective. Okay, they're subdistant. Oh, wow. So what I do is the system I use for this is I take a United States nickel. And if I can put it between the gills and not touch a gill on either side, they are distant. If I push it in and I touch 2 gills, they are close. And if I push it in and I hit more than 2 gills, they're crowded. I know that's not a perfect system, but for Russula, it works pretty well. And that's the system I use. And in my notes, it'll say distant, closer, crowded, and that means I tested it with a nickel. Habitat is important. If you're looking for that Russula betularum out in the Pin Oaks, you're not going to find it. If you're looking for Russula ventricosa peas out in the clay areas, you're not going to find it. It grows in sand. This one actually falls into section ingrati within the Heterophyllidea. This is one of the stinky ones. And there's a beach in Wisconsin on Lake Superior that produces hundreds of these every year. It's the only place I've seen it. I think that's the only place I've seen it. I know it's common around the Great Lakes and on the eastern seaboard, but I don't know any other lakes that have it. I wouldn't say that it doesn't exist there. It's just I've never seen it. So it's habitat. Habitat's important. Look at where it was. We say this at all the forays. When you pick a mushroom, look around, write down what trees were nearby. That can be a huge key to help us figure out what some of these Russula are. Stem flush. This is a tiny little Russula sanguinaria I found at somebody's house here in town. That's that pink color we see on the stem. That's an important identifying feature. Not all the species have that. Take note of all of them. This is, unfortunately, the best picture I had on my computer of Russula spores. I think I sent all my good ones to Britt, and I don't think those were very good either. But these are Russula spores. They vary anywhere from globose to subglobose and ellipsoid. What's cool is they have little warts, and that ornamentation that they have is amyloid, showing that blue-black reaction with Melzer's or another iodine solution. It can be isolated warts. They can have little minute connectors, or they can even form full reticulum. So they're actually quite good spores to look at. They're interesting. They're exciting. They're not just boring little ovals. They have character. those warts can get up to definitely bigger than 1 micrometer, and the connectors even can approach up to a micrometer off the edge of the spore. And Russula has some friends. So when we're out in the woods, there's some identifiers that will help us know that Russula is present, at least in its uh, underground lair, waiting to fruit. One of them, of course, is the one everyone knows, Monotropa uniflora. This is, we're going to call it, I think parasite's a little bit of a harsh word. It is a symbiont with Russula and a tree. You know, there's a bond here that I think is a little bit confusing. Maybe we don't even understand perfectly how it's working, but they are definitely involved with Russula somehow. Another one is the coral root orchids. Uh, Thank you, Brooke Reed, for the photograph. These are also a symbiont with Russula. This is maculata. I don't know if we have this species up here. I do see one of the coral root orchids with Russula variata a lot. I also don't know anything about plants, so I can't speak with any authority on that. I'm really not a plant guy. So we hear this, maybe if anybody's ever spent time with Larry, he's even sang this to you. Can we eat them? Many Russula are edible, but are they any good? For the most part, I'm going to say that, yeah, you can eat them. A lot of them are pretty flavorless and a little bit on the insipid side as far as texture goes. And there are some rules to follow, like with any mushrooms. One is, of course, is every red Russula edible when it's cooked? I don't think that that's necessarily a good idea. I do know people that have gotten extremely ill from red Russula, and it's the cramping and the purging. So I give them a nibble if they're red capped and they're spicy, like quickly spicy. I don't eat those. I have eaten some that are slowly acrid, well, like Variata. And I did eat those Corinthia rubra from my front yard one time just to try it, probably 25 years ago. And yeah, they were okay. They kind of taste mushroomy, but they're awfully mild. Any of the section compacti in other parts of the world that can actually be dangerous. Russula subnigricans being the notable species there. So any of the ones that stain red to black or gray to black, those should be avoided as well. And then the entire section in grati, the ones that smell of the almonds and bleach, they can be a gastric irritant too. So there's nothing that I know of that's like dangerous in the United States, but it's certainly not recommended. And do you really need to eat every mushroom that you see? No, you don't. But the bonus we do have is the lobster mushroom, or should I say, mushrooms. We have two here in the eastern United States. I'm not sure about the west if they get any of the green lobsters. I'm not sure. But we've got our Russula brevipees being parasitized by Hypomyces lactiflorum on the left. And then we have, I'm not 100% sure what species, and I think there's two species because I think fulvescens is one of the hosts for the green lobster because sometimes the cap is orange, but sometimes it's pink. And this is Hypomyces luteovirens, which we don't see in great quantity. And I don't know if I have one collected here or not because every time they come in, we eat them. And to be quite honest, it is a superior mushroom to the orange lobster. Now you're kind of taking a little bit of a risk there, not knowing what the host is, but we've fed that to dozens of people up here with warning, obviously, and it's preferred 100% of the time. And I know Brooke would back me up on that. I think he was the guinea pig. He was the first one to try them, as far as I remember. And now I've eaten them on a few occasions, and they are better texture and better flavor. They're just an all around better mushroom. So if you find them, hey, I'm not going to get mad at you if you fry them up. Russula parvovirescens, I threw this picture in here real quick too because I do enjoy this one for the table. This has got a very nice nutty taste to it. It's one of the exceptions to Russula being good edibles. And then, of course, any of the shrimp Russula, they're great. I mean, obviously, all these are opinions of mine, but any of the shrimp Russula that I've had, I've actually quite enjoyed. So just a couple out there. It's not really a genus that you're going to go running out and say, "Oh, I'm going to go find a bunch of Russula for dinner tonight." That's not really what's going to happen. Russula in death. Nothing real exciting here. Just a couple ways that we know they're gone. This is a really cool Sizegites. I'm not sure species for sure. It's in the Mucorales. On a Russula pectinatoides in my front yard a couple years back. And then the much more familiar Asterophora lycoperdoides. This I find most of the time on Russula densifolia, but I don't think exclusively. That species that I'm calling Russula consobrina seems to be a host as well. And it looks very similar to densifolia, just without the dense foliage. So I thank everyone very much. This was a little shorter than I thought it was. I thought I timed it at about 80 minutes, and it looks like we're at about 51. But I do thank everyone, and hey, stop throwing them at trees and put a little effort into it. Quit putting them in piles. But thank you, and I will take questions now with the help of Trent.
Yeah, do you want me to read you the questions? That was awesome, by the way.
Thank you. Let me figure out how to do this.
Okay. Yeah, I could just read you a couple here that have come into the Q&A. Greg Marley has one. I thought about the cuticle peel that was interesting. He's asking if the cuticle peel varies with air humidity.
It definitely does with the age of the mushroom, so I don't think it's perfect. What you try to do is you try to find a cap that hasn't flattened out yet. So yeah, air and humidity. I guess I've never really measured the differences there. Definitely the age of the mushroom. If you're finding a Russula that's 4 or 5 days old, they're all going to peel. But if you find them when they're still, bell shaped, you'd be amazed at how much difference there is in what one species will peel versus another.
Brooke Reed is here. He's making statements in the Q&A section. Thanks, Brooke. He said Russula luteovirens is locally abundant in locations around Telluride.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. And I think he means Hypomyces luteovirens.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll back you up 100%. Gary Linkoff, if he found a mess of them, I'm not sure what he's talking about there.
That'd be the
So,
green lobster.
yeah, the Christmas, Gary called it the Christmas mushroom.
Sure. I like
So
that.
that's good. A couple Gary stories in there. Um, One on Sardonii by Adam Boring. He says, how many of the red-capped, red-pink stemmed acrid Russula are likely to fall into Sardonii?
So what's kind of cool is, there's that thing that people say, that there's 200 red cap rustlers, they all look the same. I think that number is going to end up being a lot lower. Some people would think it would go higher. I think there's so much variation there that all these mushrooms were described and described and described, and they were probably the same species the whole time. So we're getting to that point where we're going to start to figure these out. But that's a good question, and it brings up a good point. I think that they were writing multiple descriptions for one mushroom. So and Peckiae could be the same thing. It's red cap, pink stem. Oh, but this one's taller. Oh, this one has seceding gills with age. Any mushroom can. So I think we're going to see that number go down, and I could be dead wrong on that. And I know a lot of these questions I'm not going to be able to answer. I'm just going to have to
Take your
BS
best
my way
guess.
through it. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
that's legit.
Yeah.
Ed asks, is it possible to confidently ID a red-capped Russula macroscopically, or should I give up unless I can try microscopy?
Yeah, I would say, there's a couple that you certainly can. At least get down to section. Russula flaviscens, dry it, it turns yellow. But that's also a subsection where they all do that. So there's some. Otherwise, a scope, you're going to get a lot more. And then, of course, barcoding, you're going to get, the idea is all of them. But so I'm working on it. But as far as macro goes, there's a few that'll stand out with chemical reactions, but I don't have that all sorted out. I started doing this really heavily in 2017 or 18. I don't remember. And I've got 1,000 pages of notes that I'm trying to put into a spreadsheet to kind of get some kind of a key for the red cap ones that maybe we can get a couple of them figured out without having to sequence everything that we find. Because it'd be cool to know, and maybe there's only 12 red cap species. Obviously, I know that number is going to be way low. I'm going to guess though 60 to 80 is a lot better guess than 200.
Hmm.
That's just my opinion
Mhm.
with what little time I've had to spend with them.
Okay, we got a few more. Catherine Williamson just said, haha, yes. Um, Adam Boring asked, what exactly is a bloom like in ammonii? Does it appear in other sections to your knowledge?
Uh, Russula Mariae has a prunose bloom on it. So that would be in subgenus Russula, and I don't know what section that would be in. But yeah, that's when I think of a bloom on Russula, that's the first one I think of.
Okay.
And
Um,
there's a similar species that Brooke was talking about the other day. I don't have a name for that one. I don't know what that name was, but there are a handful with that prunose cap.
Brooke is still on here. He can hop on that
He
too
didn't
if
have a
he
name for
wants.
it either.
Okay. Um, a couple kind of bigger questions, not real specific, but broad. One is, how much does compound microscopy aid in ID? Question mark spore details? Question mark cystidia sphaerocyst by Thomas Bernard.
So with the spores, you're kind of running into tendencies. So this species, and I don't have my notes up in front of me. I wish I did so I could give you some better examples. But this species has a tendency to have spores that are more globose. And this one has a tendency to have spores that are more ellipsoid. And then you'll see both next to each other in the same print. As far as
Well,
the connectors go, yeah, there's going to be some where you're going to say every spore I saw had isolated warts, and you're going to say sometimes every spore I saw had full reticulum. So with cystidia, well, Russula cystidiosa, hey, there you can see the cystidia; they're huge. So a microscope helps. That's definitely the next level with anything, with any mushroom. So you're definitely going to get a lot more information. Does it
yeah.
necessarily mean you're going to get to species level? It might not. But
So,
you're gathering information, and that's what the
yeah.
whole goal is here.
We've had like two questions about how important is microscopy for Russula. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how far can you get without a microscope?
With if you're just going on macro, you're not going to have great success. If you're going to start using a scope, your success is going to be tripled.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Now there was a
I use
related. What's that? Sorry, go ahead.
I use mine every day. I didn't spend a lot of money on it. It's a little AM scope. I bought it 10 or 15 years ago. Still works for what I'm doing. Every Russell that comes in, I scope it and write down everything. And there definitely are some species that stand out. Smaller spores. Some of them have, like a Russell early eye, has really small spores in comparison to, anything else in section Russell, which has much larger spores.
Well, we have Pat Mitchell in the house, and he's
Hey, Pat.
asking, could there be any benefit from Russula's perspective in being thrown at trees? But before you answer, I will point out Glenn Rogers is also in the house, and he said to the contrary, throw Russulas at trees and press beginners, and it's brutally instructive. But now I'll turn that over to you.
You can do that once. You don't need these beginners that can see it once. They don't need to see it every time you're in the woods. It's not that exciting. Or a little kid, let them do it. But get them back to the tables and attach some kind of a title to it.
I kind of think you're right. That is one of those things you're like, after you've seen it done so many times, you're like, yeah, that was kind of cool the first time, but
Yeah.
yeah, good answer. Um, let's see. There are a couple more general ones in here before I get back into the specifics. Oh, here's one from Zach Ewell. Are there any other families or genera piles, quote unquote, that need to add more structure to their ID presence? And we did have Adam hop on that and say scleroderma, maybe corals too, maybe hydnum. So what say you?
Corals. Wow. Yeah, corals for sure. I
Yeah.
think Romaria only has like, two valid names in North America. Everything else is borrowed. So yeah, corals, and that was, when I started this, I said when I finish Russula, I'm going to move on to corals. I'll never be done with Russula. So I'm just moving on to corals at the same time. And I'm not going to get anywhere with it. There was somebody I talked to online that actually had um, a pretty fair knowledge of the corals. And I wish I could remember his name. He corrected me on a couple on iNaturalist. I don't remember what his name was, but I'm glad somebody's out there working on it. Um, Cortinarius, of course. I mean, holy cow. I went to two of Shannon's talks in the last 2 years. I learned a ton, but wow,
Mhm.
that genus is another one that's just massive and and ever changing. I mean, the mushrooms don't change, but our perspective of them does.
Yeah, yeah. And I hope we have Shannon do a webinar for us soon on quartz.
She does a great job. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was really impressed.
I'm drawing a blank on her last name in the second.
Adams.
Adams, thank you. Greg Marley asks, I really like this question, and I may have to ask it as well. I did step out, Tavis, I got to admit, for a few minutes. So you may, I don't know where you got with your answer on this. I feel like I missed this answer. His is, I have looked and researched to get a determination on which Russulas host H. lactiflorus. Some say only Brevipes, but I find them under oaks as well. Some folks have said Russulas and some lax.
So if you ask Patrick,
Before,
there's four hosts to it,
let's
and I
just say
don't.
for everybody though, so that those that get it, we're talking about Hypomyces lactiflorus, which is the lobster mushroom, right?
Lactiflorum, yeah.
Lactiflorum. There you go. See, that's why I said H. Sorry, just go ahead. I want to make sure everybody knew what we were talking about.
Yeah, and Patrick thinks that there's four hosts, um, and the other three would be in lactifluus. So that would be lactifluus glaucescens, lactifluus piperatus, and lactifluus deceptivus. Deceptivus and brevipes look identical. Russula brevipes. A good way to tell them apart, besides the latex, because they don't always have latex if they're dried up, is you take the tip of your knife, just the point, and push it through the gills like you're making a cut across the grain of the gills. Russula brevipes, the knife makes a snapping noise. It goes snap, 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 and lactifluus deceptivus slips through without any noise.
Interesting.
So,
So,
and you're going to see glaucescens and piperatus in and around oaks. So I think that could be something somebody would play with. I mean, I don't have much of a choice than just to believe what he says when we're out in the woods, but I have certainly seen it where I've said that's not Russell Brevipes. It's just not. Where we see the most is definitely up in the black spruce, up in the little bit of boreal forest that we have here. That's where I've seen the highest concentration of orange lobsters. That's absolutely Russell Brevipes. That is. But like he said, in the oak ear woods, no, I have a tendency to believe that's going to be uh, Lactophlus piperatus more than anything. And you can't tell by gill density because they're so crippled and deformed by the mold that yeah, identification of the host is essentially impossible with your eyes. They all look the same. They look like a destroyed mushroom.
so you're talking about Patrick Leacock,
Yes.
and he said four, and
I'm on board with that.
you on
I think
board?
there's probably those four. That makes sense to me. And we've seen them in the vicinity, but I don't know. I've got Piperatus at my house. I do not get lobster mushrooms but I've got bur oak across the street. My dad has white oak. He gets Piperatus and he gets lobster mushrooms. He gets them like crazy. Not in the volume that we see in the black spruce forest, but uh, they're certainly there.
Do you like to eat that mushroom?
Yeah, I don't eat as many mushrooms as people think I do, but texturally it's great. Flavor wise, it's kind of on the mild side.
Yeah. I know you don't eat them, but you always have a pretty on point comment about how they taste and how to cook them and what their texture is.
I've tasted all of them. I just,
Hmm.
you know, I eat them. It's not my everyday thing. It's not that I don't enjoy them. It's just I don't go as crazy as some people do, where we have to eat everything we find. I'm more interested in the photos and studying what's out there.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Whatever, whatever.
yeah. Do it
Hey,
how you want to.
Glenn Rogers is asking, I think, a good question. Say something more about Kibbe and Fato's publication? Is it online? Is it helpful today? I'd like to hear a little bit more about Kibbe and Fatto too.
So I love the thing and I use it, and you kind of use it to get close is what you do, but I think some of it's super accurate. But Matt Wanasek had the original version. It's just a little flipper like this. It is available online. It's easy to find. I've had it on my computer for a decade. Um, and then this was the first real copy I'd seen of it, which is nice because the colors in here are accurate. My computer screen throws colors very, very strangely. So I don't know where to find, the original prints of it. I think I kind of got lucky getting that one, though I haven't really looked for it because I always had it online. And this has got spore pictures that the online one does not. And they're just illustrations, of course, but I found that to be pretty effective too. I like it a lot. It's an interesting system. Somebody, and I don't remember who, I want to say they were from Chicago though, expanded on that with the last letters of the alphabet, adding habitat. Just your option was, I think it was your option was just hardwood versus conifer, but it was another piece of evidence, another set of criteria that helps you get maybe more accurate. And a
Good.
lot of this, you get a 6 or 7 letter code with the Kibbe Fatto key, and it'll bring you to a group of mushrooms. So then you look at maybe 6 or 8 species that fall into that, whatever your code is, AIKNRS. That's the one we had earlier. There was options there. I think there was like 3 options there, and Corinthia rubra fits best. So then you kind of have to do your own research on that. But yeah, I think it's a fabulous tool. And I know I hope I'm not saying I did something illegal, but I searched for it online and downloaded the PDF years ago. And I do bring it up. I've had it up at 4A's and I've looked over some things. You get something weird, which happens all the time. And I could have just thrown up hundreds of pictures of Russula today that I've attached a name to. Some of them I know are accurate. Some of them I know are not. It's never been easy. It's just I think that we're getting better each year that we do this. But I only have 60 days to do it every year, and then that's from snow to snow.
CFF or AFF?
And I do a lot of that, and that's
Yeah.
and that's fine for now because I have collected them. So someday when everything gets, we're supposed to get all of our collections brought down to UW La Crosse at some point. Brennan and I have all the WMS collections from the last 2 years, and then our own personal collections. I think he's got 1,000 species, or a
Wow.
thousand collections, I should say.
Commissioner BA, I don't know who that is, asked kind of a similar question, I kind of partly answered. Is there a good key to Russula subgenera? I've used Mosier, but it outdates. And then Chance Knopfsinger hopped on and said, Sonari, 1998, 2005, has keys to subgenus, section, and subsection in English, but his classification is based on morphology and is shown to differ a bit from recent molecular analysis.
Right. So, like, yeah, the old system that Singer had would have been great if it worked out genetically. It just didn't. It was such a great way of doing it based on morph, but it doesn't work genetically. So any key like that, well, and that's going to be already outdated. The infragenerics that I brought up today, that system was started in 13, and like I said, they just added a subgenus last year. It's all going to be outdated, and I think the idea is we're getting closer, we're getting better, and with the cost of sequencing coming down to just a tiny fraction of what it was in the 1990s, where it was, essentially new science, really. Now, I mean, what's it cost per specimen? A couple cents.
Yeah.
That's nothing, and the speed too. Holy cow! They can do it fast now. Even in the last 10 years, the speed has come up immensely.
Yeah, that is
So
exciting how that's changed in the
for
last couple
sure,
of years. Yeah.
and the addition of and I hope I don't offend anybody here, but I don't really care for iNaturalist very much. I have started using it. I'm an MO guy. I've got 4 or 5 MO accounts where I keep all this. I think it was just last January, I broke down and started adding things to iNaturalist. There are definitely advantages to both. So I have been slapping them up there. So I think on iNaturalist, we're actually going to see the big advantage there of being able to compare sequences instantly. Put your insert sequence and compare it against everything else that's out there. So then you've got photographic evidence too. So you can really start to lump these together and say, hey, holy crap, everything here is the same species, even though the color is so much different, or the size, or whatever. So
Mhm.
when I'm adding any species to either one of those two venues, I'm also adding some microscope pictures too, just in case. And I've saved the scope pictures from everything, but my scope pictures aren't great. I got the old drop-in camera on the top that the one of the cheap junk ones. It's good enough for me what I'm looking at. I'm not publishing any of these photographs, but I do have it there. You can see it. You can see the structures, and that to me is all that's really important. I don't need to enter these in a beauty contest.
Are you going back and entering your kind of archives of data, or are you just starting to add that to your current flow as you find new things and categorize them?
I entered pictures all the way back from 1987 when I started keeping a mushroom journal. I kept a journal every year from 87 till 2012. And then I stopped and I wish I wouldn't have. Then I started again in 2017 and I still have, I've already got mine started for this year. It's all the same size, small spiral notebook. And I've got boxes of them. I mean, it's almost 40 years worth right now.
Um, we got a couple chemistry questions here for you. Ed
Okay,
asks,
then.
do you know why Russula species fluoresce under UV light?
I don't. One thing I told somebody a few years ago when they asked that, I said, depends on who peed on it. Was it a deer or was it a raccoon? I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know what makes some glow more than others. The most interesting one under UV light is actually shiitake. They disappear. They look like empty space. And I know a lot of the courts. Wow, some of the courts are incredible, but yeah, the UV hikes. I don't know. I don't usually go to them. It's not. It hasn't been of interest. Is it maybe important information? Yeah, it could be. It could be a really cool identifying feature. I haven't got into it enough. I don't think I will this year either. I've got other things to work on.
I've noted more people in the field as they're, smelling and tasting and, looking at a mushroom in their hand, they pull out their UV light and hit it
Oh,
right there in
sure.
the daytime and, add that to their to the information they're collecting.
No, and that's cool. We've turned the lights out in the collection rooms too, where all the mushrooms are on display and done walkthroughs in the dark with people. But when we're out in the woods doing a UV hike, I'm usually looking for spiders. They're cool to look at, but yeah, it's not something I've really gotten into yet. I'm still kind of a little maybe old fashioned, we'll say.
Well, let me hit you with a three-pack of questions here from Adam.
Okay.
Number one is, have you ever encountered the fabulous Russula lilacapes?
I
It's
have
like
not
finding a cryptoid at this point. I've only seen it once on Facebook.
I have never seen it.
Okay. He said, I've read about sulfovanillin. Is that a chemical worth investing in before guaiac or PDAB?
Uh, there's some notes. Actually, Quo's got some notes on using that with a few species of Russula. I never have. I don't have it in my possession. The guaiac was new to me last year, and that one was super cool. Interesting. I got to figure out how to get another bottle from Ed at some point, or wherever if he's got a source for me. But no, I haven't played with that one. I think you're looking more at microscopic level, of course. So yeah, it might be something to invest in, play with. But yeah, I don't usually stock it here. I stock my four regulars and then the PDAB and the guaiac.
Okay. I do want to tell anyone still in the chat, like with questions in there, get them over to the Q&A here pretty quick because we're getting near the end. I see Carlene Cliver has her hand raised. I'm not sure why. If you have a question, Carlene, you can pop that into the chat too, or into the Q&A area. Now, Adam's third question is, with the rise in DNA barcoding, we are seeing many provisional names popping up. Is ITS enough to confidently separate most Russula alone?
I would expect the answer is no. And only because I was just reading a discussion on that. They were talking about it was an Amanita discussion where they're seeing up to 5% difference in ITS. So I would say no. I can't give you a good knowledgeable answer on that. That's just going to be my opinion. I mean my guess. I won't say an opinion. Maybe we'll figure that out this year. We are set to have, like I said, some sequencing done at a few of our events this year. The WMS events, they're great, but we're definitely old fashioned. We got to get with the times. And this is last year was the start of that, and then hopefully more so this year.
Yeah, it seems like sequencing at events is a real regional sort of thing. In some regions,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
it's become almost par for the course, and other regions hasn't quite hit yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Stephen did it
it's funny.
at the when the NAMA annual was up here in 2017.
Mhm.
But it wasn't the same process that they're doing now. I mean, it's so fast. It's just insane how much that's advanced in the last decade.
Yeah, I bet in our life we'll head into the field and have some sort of instant test like on our phone.
For
Uh,
sure. It'll be on your phone. I like that.
it's a question of when, I think.
Yeah. Upright. Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
so that was Adam's question on barcoding. Oh shoot, Chance had a comment in there. Let me just see. I just closed it. Let me just read his comment before we move on. Um, I'm sorry, I can't find it now. Apologies, Chance. I meant to read that. Um, no, but I think he kind of agreed with you that it doesn't do it across the board. Uh,
Right.
Glenn asks, Glenn Rogers asks, Rusulas seem extremely abundant in mycorrhizals. What do we what do we know more specifically about their functional support in the forest?
I have some information on that. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I will say that uh, they're extremely drought resistant. So that's one that even when you're having a really dry year, it's one you can still go out and find. They seem to do. I mean, obviously not. They're going to do better when it's raining, but they seem to tolerate drought quite a bit better than other mushrooms, which is kind of interesting because they're so watery. But they as far as what they're bringing, I don't remember what the nutrient was. If they were better at water or if they were better at magnesium, I don't remember. I know I've got a paper that I read on it 10 years ago. Every mushroom's got its little niche there, but I don't recall on that one. Someone I'm sure knows more about that than I do.
All right, Adam is just slaying us with these great questions. Here's another one from Adam Boring. Are there any hosts other than trees for Russula? Mosses, ferns, or shrubs, perhaps?
Uh, I theorize that blueberry is one. Blueberry, of course, being in the Ericaceae, just like monotropa, but I have found Russula in blueberry patches.
Mhm.
Is that mycorrhizae? I don't know. I found them with lilacs, uh, but for the most part, uh, they're in the woods. Even the ones that are
Uh,
in stand, I've seen like ventricosipes. We looked at Russell ventricosipes just briefly tonight. I've read that it only hosts with red pine or pitch pine. I've found it with white pine. There's no doubt it was white pine, and I found it with red pine. Those are two of the three pines we have here. I've never found it with jack pine, but I've never seen jack pine on a beach. So I'm going to say trees. I won't say exclusively, but as far as I know for sure, yeah, it's been trees.
yeah,
Well,
practically.
it'd be curious to see if there's some other vascular plant that they bond with, but as far as mosses and like, I don't think so. I just don't know. You do see
Mhm.
them occasionally looking saprobic. You sometimes will see them growing on rotting wood. I just described that as they're just using that wood as a water cell. They're still bonded to a living tree somewhere. So we do see that a little bit, especially with Russula sylvestris and one of the other red ones, sylvestris for sure. Sylvicula. We'll see it with those two, and those are both section Russula, subsection Russula. They are as Russula as you can get. Tiny little red, fragile, flaky little mushrooms. Sticky cap.
Hey, and I want to point out there's a lot of good commentary in the chat. If you want to learn more about these, Ken shared a link to Guayac from myco-service.de. That's MYKO. He said he orders from them once a year and always a great product.
Oh, I got the chat open now. I thought you were reading from somewhere else.
I
Okay.
was reading from the Q&A, but I visited over at the chat and saw like, oh, that was a
Sure.
useful link in the context of this conversation. And Pat from Blue Ridge said he linked for people that are interested to a study that is references the compounds that make Russula fluoresce. So if you want to drill down into that topic, he shared a link for you. And maybe this is a chance for somebody else to share a link. John asks, my first webinar. Thank you, Tavis. Welcome, John. I love the Russulas, accurate or plain. Do you have a link for a bit more on chemicals for chemical reactions? Um,
I don't. I could have included more of that today. I was afraid I was going to, you know, bury everything in it and it was going to be too complicated. I mean, I can go through my notes and just show what some of the reactions are. Ed was very helpful on that. He did give me a couple papers on the methods there. And I'm just yeah, here's a good one too. Inosabe, yeah, Inosabaceae. Yeah, somebody can work on that one too. Okay.
Chance did answer that a little bit with a link with an article where he referenced. Chance, I put that article over in the chat where people could also see it as we kind of mark this question as answered. Um,
Okay. How do can I get to these links after this is done, or do I have to open them all right now? Do you think?
I can get the links for you for sure. When I download the recording, they send the chat. They send
Okay.
the chat as a separate. So yes, no problem. We can get that.
Okay, that'd be
Um,
great.
uh, Pat, yep, that's Pat asking, have you heard of any Russellas appearing near or in a burn?
No,
Pyro loving.
the burns here aren't really of interest for any reason. I mean, I've walked a couple up near the forest fire by Gordon a couple years ago. I don't know. It's not. We don't get the burn morels here. So, what's the little charred one? It's not an ascocarin. What's the other one that I'm thinking of? Whatever. I've seen that one. I can't think of it off my head. It's not an ascocarin. What is it? Whatever. Uh,
David Wald's bringing us back to the Kibbe's key.
yeah.
He asked, was it related to British Russellas? There's a new edition online for sale for English pounds 28.
This is for North American Russula. So Kippy and Fado did the Lexinum key for England, right? Was that the what where
Don't
that
look at me.
I'm pretty sure it was the Lexinum of Great Britain or something like that was a key working in a similar fashion. But this one is titled well, I gotta grab my readers because I'm old here. Keys to the Species of Russula in Northeastern North America is the exact title of it. I thought it was just North America. I didn't know it was Northeastern. And this is the third edition from April of 1990.
Maybe some enterprising soul can pop a link to that in the chat for us if they can Google it
I
while
think
we're
someone did. I think I saw
okay.
that link there for the PDF. And
Okay.
it's fun to play with. I mean, like I said, I was going to all these events and I even heard somebody say, screw Rushla, why are you wasting your time? I won't mention her name. But hey, play with it. We're attaching something to them so that when our species lists get published, we got a whole bunch of Rushla species on there that have, AFF Zavari, whatever. So we're padding our count, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Lisa, I think we're kind of down to the last question here. Lisa asks, and this is a good one maybe to close out with. Are there any specific Russula you are looking for or accept specimens of?
I'm definitely looking for more of the stuff out east. I went out to New Jersey, Maryland, and Pennsylvania in 2018. Hooked up with a couple people when I was out there. Three or four different groups we went with, and I was there too early. So I did see like Rushla nobilis, and I saw uh I don't remember the little guy. There was a little white one too. We saw a little bit of that, but I got there in June, and it was just too early. So I do want to work in the Eastern United States a lot more over the course of the next couple of years. The annual being in Vermont this year was quite exciting for me.
Yeah.
That's going to be I'm going to take the long way home and the long way out there, and try to hit a couple of these other forests. Definitely early eye. I'm really excited about that one. There was one that popped up a couple times in one of the Russula groups on the old Facebooker in the last couple years, which was a really cool green Russula with a green flush on the stem that I don't know has a name. I would love to find that. Uh, Similima, I think that name is deprecated now, at least in the United States. There's one similar to that out there. Balui. These are ones I've never seen that have good valid names. For Inapes, yeah, I'd love to see it. So I'm hoping that when I get out there and the trees change, you know, half the trees that grow there don't grow here. So the
Pat,
mushrooms will change, as we all know.
yeah,
With
yeah,
habitat comes
the
mushroom changes.
trees. Pat wants to know when you're going to be in Virginia to collect Russula.
I was actually looking at my calendar today to see if I could find 4 or 5 days to run down there this summer, and I might have it, but it's not going to be when you're having your event. It would be the following week is my greatest possibility. Let me see
Oh,
it. No, I don't have my calendar open to
sure,
August
they'd
anymore.
love to host you. It's not really on the way, but you could make it on the way.
No, I'm going straight from Cable to Vermont. And actually, I think the fastest route might be through Canada. I got to let Brooke know that. He's got to have his passport ready. I think Brooke's riding out there with me. But I think crossing at Sault Ste. Marie is faster than going down through
Going
Chicago.
down and
Yeah,
around. Yeah.
the Northwoods Ferry gets done, and I'm heading straight to Vermont.
Well, you can just stick them in your trunk if you need to. They
Oh,
won't
you know,
notice. Okay, well, gosh, we're at the end. I want to say thank you, everyone that's on chat. This is your chance to say your last words. I want to thank you for really wowing us with a lot of information and your personality shared in the delivery. I found it very entertaining, and I gotta say, it was less over my head than I thought it was going to be. Um, so at least from my standpoint, it really hit me in the wheelhouse of where I learned a lot. Thank you.
thanks for having me. I was happy to be here. I'm glad
All
it worked
right.
out.
All right. Well, I'll say goodnight. Say goodnight to everybody, and we'll sign off and we'll make the recording available to you probably within 24 hours on our webinar page.
Thank
Good
you
night.
very much, Trent.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.